Hello there. A very warm welcome to you all. Today we are hosting Professor Serhat Unal in the next episode of the Science Talks. It goes without saying, Professor Serhat Unal is one of the most renowned and acknowledged professors lately that we listen to him eagerly about his opinion. He is from Hacettepe University Medical School, Infectious Diseases and Clinical Microbiology. He is the head of that department, and he is also the director of the Vaccine Institute and member of the Turkish Science Board. Well, if I continue listing your titles, we will just waste another session. But let me first ask you, how are you? Is everything all right? Well, thank you. This is the most important question these days. I am healthy, thank God, and working hard. And you know how busy are the hospitals. And on the other hand, we are working on the new vaccine. But then I believe, despite all the challenges, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, I was about to ask that. Well, it is a global agenda, and then there are different waves in this pandemic. But then, compared to 6 or 8 months ago, the perceptions have changed about COVID-19, although it still remains as a top priority. But then the vaccinations have been growing our hopes. Let me put it this way. And please allow me ask a question like a journalist, but you feel free to respond as a scientist. When we will stop talking about COVID-19? Well, this is the most difficult question. I cannot tell you if it is sooner or later it's going to happen when, but I'm expecting a milestone in the next 3 to 4 months, a positive milestone. But I have two conditions: an accelerated vaccination program and strict observations of the measures. I want to remain hopeful because we have already vaccinated a wide population. We have to stop it at this level, the pandemic. Otherwise, the mutations and the new variants, if a new variant happens, which is not covered by the spectrum of the current vaccines, we have to repeat 2 doses of vaccines to 7.5 billion people. That may prolong the job, but then let me tell you my last words in the beginning. We have to continue vaccination, but nevertheless, always observe mask, distance, and hand hygiene. This goes for Turkey and also for the world. Never dismiss these measures. And in some countries, vaccination has slowed down. I believe we have to underline this with a big red pen. There is no easy way out. And your statements confirm what I wanted to say. Yes, we have to highlight this fact. We are discussing vaccines and vaccination, and it brings responsibilities. The effects of COVID-19 are now longer, and the observations are on a wider spectrum. Initially, we started vaccinating the 65 plus. That was the first risk perception, and now we're talking about, uh, you know, uh, vaccination to the kids and the teenagers. And I am hearing from the neighborhood that there are problems with the youth. So, on the one hand, we are talking about vaccination to children. But on the other hand, how are things going on? What do you think? Well, vaccination is vital, but allow me to give you a retrospective story of our fight. Well, thank God, until March 2020, COVID 19 did not enter Turkey. Eventually, we had the first cases, and then we started fighting. And since March until May 2020, we met with the disease, we learned the measures, and as a nation, we observed the measures. They weren't only mask, distance, and hygiene. We closed schools, malls, shops, and we had lockdowns. Our peak daily case was 5.5K, but then during the first week of May, the measures were loosened, and there was a perception that the summer will just kill the virus, but that did not happen. And in September and October, the rebound was huge. 30, 40K daily cases occurred. And at that level, we met the mutations and variants and different behaviors of the virus, because mutation is like a small error in the genome of the virus. Viruses are not smart. They don't plan it. When they multiply, errors happen, and when the errors accumulate, the vital proteins of the viruses change. Well, proteins are vital elements for humans, and one of those proteins are S protein, and that enables the virus to penetrate the cell and starts the whole story. So that was mutated. The first variant was alpha, and compared to the original type, it was 2.5 times more infectious. So we then said, let's have stricter measures, but then our daily cases jumped from 5.5 to 30, 40K, and then at that level, we started vaccination. And yes, it was quick to develop, but very safely developed. So on the one hand, we are trying to increase vaccination. On the other hand, we are trying to control new cases by measures. But then vaccination slows down and measures loosen up, and we had a new type of the virus, Delta, from India to the UK. Then we hit 60K. So initially we had no vaccine, but the measures were strict and the pandemic was under control. Then we had the variant and the pandemic, and despite so high levels of vaccination, the pandemic still prevails. So this Delta variant is not only highly infectious, but it also knows the receptors of the kids, and it can infect the kids. So we are dealing with a different population. Since it is more infectious, a higher number of people get sick. I mean, that is bad news for us. For the virus, it just wants to survive. But then there's another negative side. The vaccine was created by using the S protein of the original virus as a template, because that S protein attaches to the door, to the gates of our cells, and then the story starts. So the vaccine is about creating an antibody, an anti-S code that will know this S protein, identify it, attaches to the gate of the cell, and blocks the virus. That's how it blocks it. But when you have a new type of the virus, you know the template changes. So that antibody may not fit properly, so its protectiveness decreases. So with Delta, we have less protection. That is why we are talking about a third dose of the vaccine, which is an important biological development. So let's talk what we have. We have two types of vaccines, like inactive, like Sinovac, and it continues as Turcovac. And now we have the mRNA vaccines. Today we know that the 3 doses of inactive vaccines are compatible with the 2 doses of the mRNA. So an active dose of the 2 doses of the active vaccine matches the 3 one, and the World Health Organization announced that cross vaccination is good. So either 3 doses of the inactive or 2 doses of BioNTech, and despite the new types of the virus, it protects you. But after 6 to 8 months, protective effects may decrease, and that's why we need to add a booster shot. So we initially started with 65 plus, and then continue with people with underlying diseases, and then we had the occupational hazards like doctors, the police force, and the teachers. Now we are talking about the 18-year-olds, and we are encouraging them to get their shot. And then the global studies reveal that this disease also infects the kids. And I mean, in response to your question, yes, now we are also vaccinating the children. But the mutations and the new types of the virus is about proliferation, multiplication of the virus. The more the virus proliferates, the more variants we will have. And when we vaccinate people, yes, it decreases serious disease, severe disease. It reduces in infectiousness, and it helps a mild prognosis of the disease, and then reduces the proliferation of the virus. But we have to complement it with measures. If we want to stop the pandemic sooner, yes, on the one hand, we have to keep vaccination, but on the other hand, we have to strictly observe the measures, because if we cannot stop the virus to proliferate, dear Hakan, if this virus creates another variant, now in the UK they are talking about A4, now they saw it in Israel and in some European countries. The pandemic has slowed down in most parts of the world, but now in European continent, the pandemic has accelerated. I mean, and in Europe, relatively, vaccination level is higher, so the new type of the virus may not be covered by the vaccine. So we have to update the vaccines, increase the vaccination level, and observe the measures. Well, this is a critical message, sir. And from the way you introduce, I'm very impressed, and now it is clear on my mind. But now I must ask, do you think we will go back to the ground zero and start doing it all over again? Do you think there's such a risk? In theory, yes. But then on the other hand, there's also good news. Escaping from the vaccination is not like a plus or minus or black and white. It's about a reduced efficacy. And I'm not talking about a zero efficacy. So it may reduce, severe diseases. Maybe not 90%, but 80% protection will be there. But if we continue vaccinating people, we may not eradicate the disease, but people will have a mild flu, like a runny nose, some fatigue in 2-3 days. Resting at home may save your life. So that is the future outlook. But on the other hand, at the moment, we have a huge death toll. In Turkey, 200 people a day. In some other countries, even higher. We have to decrease mortality. The second big challenge is the high patient volume and its burden on the health system. There is a threshold. If you exceed that threshold, your system collapses and you cannot deal with the other diseases, like people die from a heart attack or diabetes. So you have to keep this level of patients, number of patients below a threshold. So if we can transform the disease into a mild form of flu, thanks to vaccination, so there will be less death, less hospitalization, less burden on the health system. And if that happens, the world will be saved. You know, the flu uh, virus, has mutations every year, and there's a flu shot. And, and in countries where the flu shots are high, there is a marked reduction in the disease and severity. If we can achieve that level, the pandemic will be contained, and at one level it can be eradicated. If and on the very onset we could vaccinate, strictly and observe the measures strictly, we could have saved it, but people could not do it. I think it is, a human weakness, sir. This use of masks has slowed down. We were putting it under the chin, but now people don't wear it at all. And hand hygiene, I mean, my direct observations, and here I am warning my colleagues. Well, please be careful. This is not over, and we suffered a lot. Now, the wearing a mask. People say I am vaccinated, and they know that they won't have a severe disease. So people can accept, people are willing to stop protecting themselves, but people say, okay, it is infectious, and what can I do about it? But the more it proliferates, the more varieties of the virus will occur, and then we have to fight against them. So it's not just a personal choice. If you don't observe the rules, you cannot contain the pandemic in Turkey. And if the world, the globally, if some countries don't observe the measures, we can have another wave of pandemic. And so when we're talking about fair vaccination principles, it's not about saving your country, it's about saving the world. But unfortunately, nations with money, they got the vaccination. They think that they have contained the pandemic, but like the UK, very high level of vaccination, but because of the travelers, now they have a new variant. So this is a global war. We have to save ourselves, then our country, and the world. Well, yes, sir, you are very right. But then, recently you were expecting the pandemic to, uh, go milder, but then there is a lot of disinformation in the media, on social media, and there's a lot of debates. Discussions are normal, but then lately in Europe, you said there may be a new wave of the pandemic. And in France, I watched an interview. People are anti-vaccination. They refuse it, and they say for the past 2 3 years, the kids see people with a mask. We have to stop it. I don't really understand their logic. I don't understand their perception. We know the death toll. How can we prevent this information? Well, that is where we fail. Unfortunately, we could not stop it. And social media, despite so many positive assets, it is a convenient medium for quickly spreading the wrong ideas. People say, okay, this is my body, and you can only, you know, give me the shot when I want it. But my personal freedom should not conflict with the people sitting next to me. So if I don't get the shot, and if I am infecting 5 or 6 people, and if one of them dies, how can you be in peace with yourself? We can only overcome this with education. Many countries do it, but then we may consider making it an obligation. In America, people say, if you don't get your shot, you cannot go to work. In Egypt, the public officers have 2 weeks. Go get vaccinated, then you cannot go to work, and after some time, you'll be dismissed from your job. Well, these are governmental decisions, of course, state level decisions, but I, as a physician, I care for my life. I'm also responsible for the lives of people around me. And I think this philosophy appeals to our nation. In our culture, you cannot sleep peacefully if your neighbor is hungry, and you can't be happy if people around you are not happy. These are our traditions, our customs. I can't understand how people are now allowing others to die because they selfishly don't get vaccinated. I mean, I don't even know how we can solve this, Mr. Güldağ. It is a hard case. Yeah, sometimes you feel desperate, but then maybe we can encourage people consume, uh, correct sources of information, and maybe make them more accessible. And the media may assume a higher responsibility and make the correct sources of information more accessible. And perhaps the talk we have today will be a part of that trajectory. I mean, you just summarize that, and I mean, support it with your hand gestures. It's impossible. It's impossible to misunderstand it. But then people, I mean, people say, some people say, I mean, does the vaccine work or not? I think we have to, you know, talk about it more often and in a more systematic way. Like maybe we need to be have a broader organization. Ministry of Health has its web pages, but maybe it's not enough. Maybe we should do more. You know, there are certain groups that they are total refusers. And in Turkey we don't have that as much as in the U.S. But then now most people say corona vaccine has been quickly developed. Could they take enough measures? Sometimes it takes 10 years to develop vaccine. There's a preclinical phase. You have to identify an antibody and prove that it's not toxic in the cell, and then you need to make animal models. And then anti-Turkey knows this story. You have to conduct phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies in tens of thousands of people. But then with the COVID, it was like firefighting, in Spain, the Canary Islands, the lava, it's just unstoppable. We had to, do firefighting, and the most efficacious weapon is the vaccine. And we have adenovirus vaccines, mRNA, and their technology was there. You may think, okay, it was too quick and we didn't know the side effects, but globally we are talking about 7 billion doses of vaccination. The former vaccines developed in 10 years, maybe they were given to 3, maximum 4 million people. This vaccine has been administered to billions of people. And you couldn't hide side effects. Everybody knows each other. There are no major side effects. And I understand people's anxieties. This is not like a cancer disease. If somebody has a lung cancer, you have to give something. If it is a novel drug, okay, it is new, but this patient has to use something. But the vaccine is different. You are not sick. You have a risk of getting sick, and prevention is the key. We are all aiming prevention, and phase by phase. Today we know that this vaccine is safe. But then safety doesn't mean zero side effect. Today you may drink an aspirin and you may have a stomach bleeding. If you are afraid of this vaccine, there is this alternative medicine, things that obtained from the nature. Even them may have side effects, like the water. You drink water, check it out. If you drink 10 liters of water, what happens? That we have a water poisons situation. So the rule is, what happens if I get vaccinated and what happens if I don't? Pros and cons. Like, one vaccine causes infection on the heart membrane. So many debates were there, but it is 1 out of 1 million. And those who had infection on the heart membrane, were fully recovered in 3 to 4 days. Nobody died. But 4% of COVID causes pericarditis. 4%. But I mean, it's so open, so clear. But then people seem not to understand, and then there are so many rumors around. Like they say, if a famous somebody has microchips and they inject your microchips, people believe in it. I was watching the telly. A 65 years old male said, "Well, son, they are installing chips. I don't want them to eavesdrop." Others say it causes infertility. This is total misinformation, disinformation, and they hide the facts, the benefits. Well, of course, there are different generations, like Generation Z. You have to access them over internet. 50 plus, you need opinion leader. Turkey is a big country. Our eastern regions are different than western regions, and the level of development are also different. We have to think and find the best ways to reach people. Let's be frank, the speed of vaccination is not ideal. Our capacity is much greater. We have the vaccine, we have the team, but we don't have the people who want to get vaccinated. This is an opportunity that we should never miss. It was a golden opportunity for our country. We can continue our lives, for manufacturing. I think it's a huge chance. It's an opportunity. But then there are countries deprived from vaccine, and some people say, where is my vaccine, and they cannot find it. Well, sir, you are talking about education, and the solution is educating people. But then when we are talking about education, I mean, traditionally speaking, we used to have a face-to-face education, and then we had to stop it. But now we are back to schools, face to face. What do you think about it? What are your observations? Is everything all right? Do you have any recommendations? Well, lessons learned from previous pandemics. thought us to close the schools on the onset of the pandemic, and it happened all around the globe because there were so many unknown things. But lately, we learned that kids get infected from the community. It doesn't originate from the schools. And recently, government says we don't want to close the schools. Schools are last to close and first to open. I mean, I'm not saying it is zero risk. I mean, children also get infected, but at a very low rate. But it's not just the children. We are talking about teachers, parents, all going to school. So we have to observe certain rules and measures, and they were set. And it is crucial to observe those three rules: mask, distance, and hand hygiene. We need all teachers to get vaccinated, not just the teachers, drivers of the school buses and their assistants. They have to get vaccinated. We have to observe the rules, and Turkey and the government are producing beautiful guidelines. But we have to monitor compliance, and we have to encourage, if not enforce, compliance. That is where we fail. We have all the preparations, we got all the rules, but we fail in practice. So it's also about education, right? Well, yeah, I mean, in schools we have cases too. It's like a clustering sometimes. But all of these things were published. You know, when you close a school, how many cases? Sometimes you got four cases in one class. Now, it might be a cluster. If that happens, you close that class. You don't want them to spread it to the rest of the school. You send the kids back home, and that is the solution. And from time to time, Minister of Education makes such statements like such and such number of classes have been posed out of such and such number of schools. I mean, we have to observe the rules and we have to keep the schools open because if people cannot go to school 2, 3 years in a row, it will be irreversible. You may have economy problems. May have troubles like 1, 2, 3 years, but education is not like that. You have to get the kids back to school, and I believe that is the sentiment of the government as well. But let me talk about the universities. They are also now back to face to face. In medical school, I joined inpatient training. In the past, I had 10, 12 students following me when I visit the patients. Now we have only 4 or 5. And we make sure that they are vaccinated. Sometimes, people lie and they say, I am vaccinated. I mean, thank God, none of my students lied to me about that, but we double check it. And when we are, in a class, even in outdoors, we wear masks because we are very close to each other. And then we were discussing whether making the vaccines compulsory. But if you don't get your shot, then you need 2 PCRs a week. Unfortunately, otherwise you will infect people. And in hospitals, we have so many immune suppressive patients, like 70 years old, diabetic patients, or cancer patients, and we know how severe they might become. And then that segment of the population, elderly and with underlying diseases, despite double vaccination, they may have severe COVID cases. So it all comes back to vaccination. People need to get vaccinated, and if they don't get vaccinated, they have to observe the rules. They need 2 PCRs a week. If you don't want vaccination, if you don't want PCR, you have to stay away from people. So don't come to school. Don't pose a risk. So same thing for parents. Maybe they shouldn't send their kids to school. But then I don't think people are complaining about it, or maybe I haven't seen too many. Well, I think we are doing very well. And the secondary school, high school, and even in universities, the university students do not get vaccinated much, but I want to encourage them to get vaccinated as quick as possible. Students may think, well, nothing's gonna happen to me. Well, first of all, you never know if nothing's gonna happen or not. But 1 out of 1,000, one young person out of 1,000. For that 1,000, that means 100%. But then you can become a porter. You can infect others to your mothers, your grandparents. They may have double or triple doses of the vaccine, but even though you have vaccination, you can still suffer the COVID-19. So I want to encourage university students, for the sake of your grandparents, please get your shot. If you respect your elderly, you have to get vaccinated. Whatever arguments you may have, just leave them aside and get vaccinated. I mean, get vaccinated and then keep debating. So, dear professor, you were talking about vaccination, and I want to probe on that. However, I want to ask your opinion about Sinovac and BioNTech. Scientists and also the people, the society is discussing, get that, don't get that, that one is good, this one is bad. Well, there are different vaccines and different studies, like Turkovac in Turkey will soon be released. If you want to update us on that, we will be eagerly listening to you, sir. I think you got the gist of my question, right? Absolutely. Thank you, Hakan Bey. And let me respond you with that gist. Well, I try to explain how a vaccine is produced. If this disease enters human body and keeps proliferating, and as it passes through your nose, it destroys the nose. I mean, buds, and then you cannot smell anything, or it enters the lungs, and there are the air sacs like a bunch of grapes, and the body sends its liquid elements and the white and red blood cells, but then those air sacs, instead of air, they are filled with liquid, and then you cannot breathe, and you need a ventilator, or it goes to heart, cause myocarditis, or goes to the brain and cause anencephalus or other diseases in other parts of the body. But of course, the body has its defense mechanism, the immune system. We have two types of defense mechanisms. The first one is the antibodies. The second one works through cells, and they increase the number of cells which can identify the virus and kill them. And last but not the least, the antibody, the creating the antibody of that S protein. Well, your body makes it naturally, but what we do is we isolate the virus, kill it, and then administer it to the body, and the body starts responding without getting sick. And when the real virus infects you, your body is ready. So we need to identify target antibodies, and S proteins are the real targets. And the inactive vaccines, what they do is they proliferate the virus in a cell and purify it, kill it, and they administer the entire virus. Sinovac and Turkovac, it is inactive. It's a killed virus, and the S protein, carries that and produces antibodies. Is it good? Yes. Have been using it for a century? Yes. About a major side effect? Almost none. So it has been created and being used, but then the technology has been evolving. Now they say, okay, I don't want to administer the entire virus. I only need S protein. Let me just filter it, and the body generates antibodies against protein S. So we can have targeted proteins, an increased number of S proteins. Well, this was done. S protein, could be obtained from another fungus, or S protein can be artificially synthesized and then given to the body. So, but then the technology has so advanced. There's a DNA code that synthesizes protein, but we now decoded the DNA, and we know which gene is responsible for ordering protein S generation. So we harvest that gene and administer, and that is called messenger RNA. So part of the genome of the virus is harvested and then given to the body. We know this method for 25 years, but it wasn't successful because when you give mRNA to body, the body just kills it, destroys it. But this nanotechnology, they created nanometric lipid spheres, and this nucleic acid is embedded in that cell, and this sphere or ball carries it. It knocks on the door of the cell, enters the cell. This messenger RNA, and when it is in the cell, it uses the protein factories of the body and then generates protein S. And then the immune system starts generating the antibodies. And since all this happens within your body, there's a much greater level of antibodies synthesized. Like the inactive vaccines, they can create this much antibodies, but messenger RNA, since it is partly alive, can generate this level of uh, antibody. That is why the first one needs 3 doses, 3 shots, but the second one is just 2 shots. And that is why it has higher side effects, because it has high antibody ratio. I mean, this level of efficacy means this level of side effect, and that level of efficacy means that level of side effect. But is it intolerable? I mean, billions of shots were given, and it is tolerable. I mean, there is no such risk. And then this adenovirus, the Oxford virus, there is also a RNA genetic code. And instead of a lipid profile, they are using adenovirus, another virus. So it takes the proliferation capacity of that other virus, but that is replicated with our virus. And this poor virus thinks that it is carrying its own genome, but adenovirus will not be proliferated. And corona's genetic profile synthesizes protein. This is all technology. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, now they are talking about bringing this technology in cancer, and I believe that will be the cure. We will soon have cancer vaccines. You will see it. So, well, sorry, you sound tired. Well, I mean, no, it's all right. It's all right. Can you remind me the question again? Well, I think you beautifully summarized. I was curious about different studies on vaccines. Yeah, whatever vaccine you can reach, please take it. I mean, side effect profile is almost none. And in Turkey, we are working to produce our own vaccine. God knows that.
We are committed to that, but in the past 20 years, Turkey resumed its efforts to produce its own vaccine because when you need it, uh, and then you have to beg other countries to get it. In the past, Turkey had the capacity to produce vaccine, but then it lost this capacity. Now we're trying to recover, but then producing a vaccine requires experience, and it's a race. Like, for example, AstraZeneca Oxford collaboration in sixth or seventh month, they produced the vaccine because the Oxford group has been dealing with the coronavirus types for 2 decades. The great grandfather MERS-CoV, which came from the camels in Saudi Arabia. The Oxford group, they started much ahead, and then AstraZeneca, is a global giant pharma, and they have been producing vaccines. And then, thanks to Ur in Germany, he has been studying messenger RNA to dealing with cancer. But he's a bright fellow. He realized it and he modified his vaccine, and now he produces in collaboration with Pfizer and the Sinovac in China. They were producing A hepatitis. Now they removed it and they're producing corona. In Turkey, our institute and there are maybe 130 for the candidates being produced. Developing a vaccine, running animal models, and then phase one, phase two, phase three is not easy. And in Hacettepe Vaccine Institute, we are expecting brighter outcomes. And one of those vaccines will be produced in Hacettepe, but then mass production is another thing. Producing 1,000 doses is different than producing 10,000, and it is totally different to produce 1 million. It's scale up. You know, you are not regenerating the virus in 1 liters in 10,000 liters. It's scaling up, and that's a biological process. Not an easy replication. Search vaccine keyword in New York Times, and they have been following all the updates, and over maybe 350 teams produced vaccines, but 10, 12 of them had a scale production. 10 in the US, four in the US, four in China, one in Russia, one in UK, and one in India. I mean, 350 vaccines were produced, but very few countries have the capacity to upscale, which is important. And then let's move on. Turkey and Turkovac. In Kayseri, Professor Aykut Özdarendeli has been dealing with vaccine for a long time, and for Crimea Congo vaccine, he has an huge experience. Is he a marathon runner? Yeah, but comparing the conditions in Turkey is like we are starting from way behind compared to advanced countries. I could had a good luck. Sinovac had their preclinical studies in China. They were already producing hepatitis A, and they did their phase one and phase two in their own country on hundreds of people, and now they need thousands of people. But in China, they don't have enough people, and enough people with disease. And phase three means you need two arms. One arm has vaccine, the other one doesn't get vaccine, and they continue their daily routine. And you compare how many people get sick on the vaccine arm, how many people don't get sick in the passive arm, and the gap shows you the efficacy. And you need a country where the disease continues, and of course there are politics involved. America will not accept it. Brazil accepted, Indonesia did. They wanted Turkey, and Minister of Health said, yeah, we are open to partnership. So Turkey, you know uh, in line with Turkey, we run a phase 3 study of a vaccine developed in another country, and in December we reviewed it, and then this vaccine was licensed in Turkey with an emergency protocol, and then we published our studies in Lancet, a global journal. And Turkey had a chance to produce the vaccine at an early stage, and then we negotiated with BioNTech, and it arrived at Turkey on. And then let me get back to Aykut Özdarendeli. He constructed the vaccine. He completed his animal models in Kayseri University in clinical centers. They completed phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 2, since we had the Sinovac experience, we were also involved in the construction of phase 3, but then we had another problem when we were running the first Sinovac trial. There wasn't an active vaccine in the world, and it was ethical. We could obtain permission to vaccine one arm and not to vaccine the other arm. But now in Turkey we have Sinovac and BioNTech. But like, but I mean, I cannot tell someone, I will just try it, and you will follow me up for a year. So on the one arm we have Turcovac, on the other arm we have Sinovac, and we are doing that in 8 centers under coordination of Hacettepe. We already hit certain levels. Numbers are very positive. There are no major side effects in both arms. We don't know the efficacy yet, but it is safe. That is for sure. Some people got sick, but not very much. It's going very positive. And once we hit certain volume, we will say, okay, Turcovac is compatible with Sinovac. That's our expectation. But then, now we are discussing, people who had 2 shots of Sinovac need a third shot. And the third dose may be Sinovac or Turcovac because they are very similar vaccines. And we are also, running for the third shot license. I'm positive about this. So I think the roadmap is clear, but can you give us a date? I mean, is it possible that you can share with the people? It is difficult to give a, deadline for a biological process. God forbid if someone has develops a side effect, we have to stop everything. It is not a hard science like producing a car. When if one component malfunctions, you replace it and the car keeps running. But viruses, they operate on a live body, and it is a little unpredictable. But so it is ceteris paribus. So if all conditions remain the same, by the end of the year it will be licensed. Well, we've been hearing news, but it was great to get confirmation from your end. You also said we are talking about tiny units, like 500 times smaller than a hair. I mean, ours is an inactive vaccine, but a second vaccine is coming, the VLP. Phase 2 is complete, phase 3 is coming. The 4 different protein of the virus, it is loaded on a particle which is similar to the virus, and the body thinks it's a virus, lets it in, and antibodies are synthesized. It's an interesting technology, and it will soon arrive to phase 3. The world needs more vaccines. 6.5 billion doses were given to people in the world, and I believe that reached to 10% of the global population. A huge population is expecting vaccine. And first, how many vaccines do we need? So we need new vaccines to be developed. The other one is the distribution, like mRNA. Now you need minus 25 degrees Celsius, and when you unpack it, it expires in a week. And the third challenge is fair distribution of vaccine. You have to cover entire planet. And fourth one is vaccine refusal, production, distribution, fair distribution, and persuading people is another challenge. So this is what we're dealing with. But if I understand correctly, this is a marathon run. First of all, you have to accept that you're running a marathon. Absolutely. So admit that you're part of the marathon. And then you have this like a 400 meters, race with a challenge race. And you need an Usain Bolt in that. But then, as far as I understand from what you have told, we have able professors, and Turkey may speed up and accelerate, and this is not going to end with COVID-19. It's a matter of 100 years, and I mean I don't want to use these words, but you know you know, and I mean we don't know what is hidden in what is in the pipeline. Of course, I mean the world will witness another, will definitely witness different uh, pandemics. There are centers of excellence. One center deals with epidemiologic studies, tries to understand what's going on. The other one isolates and works on nucleic acid chain, and the other one works on the vaccine. The other one works on the drug. In theory, the world has done that, but in practice, it doesn't work the same because on one side you have China, on the other side you have America. I mean, this disease is not only a medical challenge, but it's also a political and geopolitical issue. Every country says, my nation first. But when you say my nation first, you need a capacity to produce it, and you need a robust economy. As a Turkish doctor, I'm proud to say that Turkey is at a very good level. And I know there has been criticism, and yes, we were fighting against an unknown dilemma, but our response to the pandemic was far above the global average. And with a little more encouragement, we can even reach higher, and this mask, distance, and hand hygiene. The virus is still with us. It is ready to hit you another blow. And if you are old or if you have an underlying disease, despite your vaccine, it will knock you out. So the virus is still there. Don't drop your guard. Guard means mask, distance, and hand hygiene, and follow the rules set by the government. Well, thank you, sir. It was a very enjoyable and educational talk. Maybe we end this episode here because we understand that vaccine can become a nationalistic issue, and maybe we need to deal with our problems ourselves, and we can also help the world because Turkish people are generous and they care for others, and it is important to move ahead. It was amazing. Thank you so much for informing us. Well, maybe your questions were even more amazing. Well, thank you, sir. You are most kind. We look forward to a next round of our talk. I want to talk about different aspects of this matter, but let's put a semicolon, but not a full stop. Thank you so much, sir. See you soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we wish our audience to stay safe and healthy. In this episode of Sabri Ülker Foundation Science Talk, we hosted Professor Serhat Unal, we discussed COVID-19 and advances in science and vaccination. We deeply appreciate him for such a knowledgeable talk. Thank you, sir, and thank you for your time, dear audience.